Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Doug Kreuzkamp. I'm based in San Francisco, and I'm the founder and CEO of Springshot. While Renee and Bob have highlighted changes to airport infrastructure and the passenger experience, I wanted to share a few insights on changes that we see occurring to airport operations, in particular, the way that we manage airport cleaning. As Bob just shared, this is really an acceleration moment for cleaning. Three trends have emerged over the last decade that really transform static cleaning operations into a more dynamic and collaborative ecosystem. But it's been COVID-19 that's really accelerated these trends in airports and really making it in the future where airports will no longer have a choice. It's a more productive way to manage operations, and it will just be the norm. But Pieter, if we go to the next slide, kind of like Renee, before we jump to the future, let's look at the present, and very similar to Renee, including let's look in the past. And so at the far right has really been the state of cleaning operations for probably the last century. I'm sure you're all familiar with this sort of sheet. You'll see this on the back of the door when you exit the restroom. This is a simple signature sheet, and forever, that's the way janitorial operations have been managed. We've got three different types of workflows, and I hesitate to use the word workflow, but three types of workflows that janitorial operators have deployed, over the last few decades. The first of those is what we call the potted plant, and that's literally, let's have a janitor stationed in a room, and let's tell them to stay there all day, just cleaning that room over and over again. And there's some airport restrooms where you will see that today. It's very inefficient, but that's one approach. The second is the clockwork, which is on the hour, every hour, just make the rounds. It doesn't matter if something is dirty, if it's clean, the expectation is perform a task. And the last one, unfortunately, is the way that a lot of janitorial operations actually work today in airports, and it's the scramble approach. There's very little oversight, and janitors know if they see something that's dirty, go clean it, but it's very much scattershot, and there's very little management. So why is that the case? If we turn to the next slide, just to bring it back to where we're at today, there's all the talk of robotics, moving into janitorial. Certainly there are aspects of it where we've moved into more of robots performing the cleaning tasks. But let's face it, around the world in airports and in most facilities, cleaning remains particularly human endeavor. And if we look at the humans and the operations and how we've gotten to today, unfortunately, based on a number of factors, with outsourcing being one of the primary ones, over the last few decades, the cleaners are put out into the field in the operation. They have little training. A cleaner in an airport in the Americas may have an hour or two of training on cleaning. There's this weird expectation that cleaning is very subjective. There's this weird expectation that someone just knows how to clean. And so with very little training, we throw someone into the operation. As you can see, this gentleman here, there's often very little direction. People are just told, do this, follow one of those workflows that I shared earlier. And then there's very little feedback. And when you combine that with the mental stress on a human janitor of working in isolation, it's weird because you're in an environment with lots of people, but you as a team member are working by yourself throughout the day. And combine that with the fact that it's a physically difficult job to do. There are a lot of injuries physically, not to mention the mental side of things. It's a very difficult job. So if we move to the next slide, we'll see the results of that, sadly. And that's expectations unmet. So expectations from a passenger experience side of restrooms or terminals not cleaned up to the matter that they would expect. And then certainly from the airport operator side, of productivity, of wasted manpower, of people in perception just standing around not getting the work done. And unfortunately, this is what happens. So as Bob mentioned, as we go to the next slide, this COVID-19 is really an acceleration. And so I'll touch on in a second three trends, you can see them here, that have really developed over the last decade. They've been there, but there's not been this catalyst moment to really drive these into airports. But we believe you're going to see that. We're seeing pieces of it today. There are airports now really focused on digitizing their cleaning operations, putting RFAs out to see what they can do in this space. And the reason is, to the right, that obviously anecdotally, and the data suggests it, passengers expect things to be clean. And beyond clean, that cleanliness has this connotation of safety. And so if airports are not doing their best to keep facilities clean, obviously passengers are not going to fly. They're not going to get back on aircraft. And so from our vantage point, we believe it's this moment that's finally going to drive these three trends through airport cleaning. And so we'll go to the next slide. I'll touch on the first one. First one we wanted to highlight is the ubiquity of cleaning-enabled sensors and IoT. Outside maybe Japan and South Korea, until recently, technology inside restrooms and terminal operations had changed very little in decades. Sensors and the advent of IoT has really changed that. Now there are hundreds of sensors and smart fixtures on the market that can be used to move cleaning into the digital realm. These IoT devices are designed to collect data on a specific topic and then share that data through the cloud via either Wi-Fi or through smartphones enabled with Bluetooth Low Energy. Now on this slide, I've highlighted a handful of these sensor types to provide just a flavor of what's possible. And so when used in concert, these devices help identify dynamically, so dynamically when cleaning must be performed, moving us away from those static workflows. So from left to right, just to go through these different types of sensors. At the far left, we have a passenger flow and heat map sensor, like this one that's manufactured by Zovis. These sensors can be programmed to share when the number of passengers who have flowed through an area have reached a certain threshold, or when a certain event has occurred. So given cleaning is often based on human traffic through an area, they can be used to alert janitors to take action when a certain passenger input threshold has been met. Next to the right, we have customer sentiment terminals, like this one manufactured by Happy or Not. These devices allow airports to identify real-time passenger sentiment. You often see them positioned outside restrooms, and they serve two purposes. First, they could be used to dynamically trigger workflows, just very similar to the passenger flow sensor. Or even more importantly, in the cleaning realm, they can identify whether the cleaning program that's been implemented by the airport is meeting the passenger's expectations. So to put meat on that bone, for an example, should the restroom be cleaned after every 150 passengers that flow through the space? Or should we tweak the program so that the restroom is clean after every 125 passengers that flow through the restroom? Or, no offense to the gentleman on the call, but maybe it matters if it's a men's room or a women's room, right? What the throughput should be to drive that. And so when you think about the 360-degree view of that terminal, it's informing us so that we can build programs, cleaning programs that objectively meet the expectations of the passenger. And then finally to the right, we'll group these two together. These are smart fixtures, like the Colo paper towel and soap dispensers you'll see here manufactured by Georgia Pacific, and automatic trash compactors like this one manufactured by Harmony. These smart devices identify when a specific action must be taken. For example, when the paper towels or soap dispenser needs to be replenished, or when the trash needs to be emptied. So in summary, these sensors allow airports to move away from that potted plant, right, and clockwork type janitorial workflows I mentioned earlier, towards a more dynamic, targeted, and efficient approach that meets actual cleaning demand. The second trend that I wanted to highlight on the next slide is the emergence of sophisticated collaboration platforms that empower and direct janitorial staff. And while sensors and IoT are essential to the movement, they're only one part of the equation. Around the world, most cleaning tasks, again, continue to be performed by human beings. And these human beings, they need to be directed as to when to complete cleaning tasks, what type of tasks, where, and for what duration. To move away from the static workflows, pen and paper obviously is no longer an effective management tool. So janitors, they need to be connected digitally to sensors via smartly designed mobile apps and in a holistic way that packages tasks. For example, janitors should not be directed randomly to move from concourse A 1 minute because a sensor says, hey, I need the paper towels replenished, all the way over to concourse Z 2 minutes later because there's a spill. There needs to be a platform in the middle that intelligently processes all these inputs from all these different sensors to figure out what's the way to the best package this work. And then based on the geographic positioning of janitors, based on the certain qualifications, based on their work availability, that platform can then intelligently distribute that work so that cleaning can be done, both meeting expectations and in the most productive way possible. Finally, the last trend that we wanted to touch on, and this really is a critical piece, is the hybrid integration platform approach, or you could just say the ubiquity of APIs. These have really changed in the software world over the last 10 years, and that things have opened up. And so through an integrated approach, you can really look at incorporating best practices from a sensor standpoint. And so you could look at a specific use case and say, I'm most focused on the gate hold area, and I want to make sure that I don't have trash sitting around the trash can. Or your use case could be focused directly on restrooms, and I want to make sure I provide my passengers with the best restroom experience. So as an airport, you're positioned in a way where you can go after the use case you want, find the sensors you want, and then pair that with a collaboration platform that's prepared to take all of that input and distribute it out to a workforce. And so no longer are you required to do the one size fits all, follow that approach, where you need to marry a partner and say, look, I'm going with this partner for the full stack. They're going to provide everything I need for janitorial. And if there are other pieces I need, I just need to pray, right, that my partner eventually evolves and moves into that space. With the ubiquity APIs, it's very easy on the software engineering side to integrate with a sensor. As time goes on, the protocols on what data should be shared and what format they continue to standardize. So it's very easy for a software company to bring in that sensor data, make sense of it, and again, route it out to a distributed workforce. Final slide in closing, just quick recap. We've got 3 trends, right, that have emerged in cleaning that are taking us from that static and isolated type environment to a dynamic and collaborative environment. These trends are being driven by COVID-19. We no longer believe that these are going to be optional. Airports will need to go in this direction. But the beauty of this movement is that it will change how airports look at cleaning, how they look at the digitization of cleaning, and a number of benefits are going to accrue from that. So in closing, obviously better cleaning, an enhanced passenger experience. As we see here with the ACI study, additional revenue, that's a nice benefit, but that will come from cleaning. Clearly lower operating costs. And then the final one, which is near and dear to our team at Springshot, and it's the leveling up of the workforce. And while robots are not doing all the cleaning around the world today, let's face it, it's inevitable. At some point, there will be more of a human-robot partnership. And it's very important for us to accelerate and level up the janitorial team members around the world so they get familiar with technology, because in the future, it's not just going to be a mobile app. They will be deployed to interact with robots and make sure that the robots get the job done. So that's it, guys. Exciting times for us. It's terrible that it's COVID. Like everything else that we do, it's terrible. It's COVID that's brought us here. But an interesting time in cleaning. I appreciate everyone's attention.